This meeting is now called to order. There is one change to the agenda. That is item number 8. The daytime population methodology and draft will be postponed to a later meeting. We'll now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tracy Clark stepped away. Nicholas Junction.
Present.
Cole Hunger or anyone from Avondale.
Present.
Vice Chair Cotterman.
Here.
Stacy Bridge Denzak or anyone from Carefree.
I'm here.
Stephen Perales or anyone from Cave Creek. Sam Andrea Chandler. Or anyone from Chandler? Sam was on. All right, Sam, let us know when you're. Jose Macias.
Present.
Victor Cantu. You too. Victor. Okay. Farhad Tavasoli, Ground Hills.
Present, sorry.
Anyone from Gila Bend? Kyle Meares, Gilbert?
Yep, I'm here.
Alex Lerma or anyone from Glendale? Christian Williams, Goodyear?
Present.
Anyone from Guadalupe? Anyone from Litchfield Park? Rudy Lopez or anyone from City of Maricopa?
Present.
Is that Rudy?
Yeah.
Thanks. Adam Cannon, Maricopa County.
Present.
Kelly Rorex or anyone from Mesa?
Josh Granlenard, City of Mesa.
Brandon McMahon from Paradise Valley.
Present.
Rob Kufas, Peoria.
Present.
Emily Dawson, Phoenix.
Present.
Tara Harmon or anyone from Pinal County. Sarah Clark, Queen Creek. Brian Myers or anyone from Salt River, Pima, Maricopa Indian Community. Taylor Reynolds, Scottsdale.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm here. Thanks.
Tiffany Kopp, Surprise. Tiffany? Okay. Jacob Payne, Tempe.
Present.
Ben Davidson, Valley
Sorry.
Metro. Oh.
Can you hear me? It's Tiffany Kopp, present.
Thank you, Tiffany. Ben Davidson, Valley Metro.
I'm here. Present.
Anyone from Wickenburg? D.
Scott, this is Sam from Chandler. I'm in now.
Thank you. Gregory Arrington or anyone from Youngtown? Okay, Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Scott. Next item is number 2 on the agenda. That's called to the audience. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. Do we have any comments for this item?
Mr. Chair, we received written comments and they are provided to the members via email and by hard copy for those in the room prior to the meeting.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 3, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 31st, 2023? We have a motion.
This is Farhad from Fountain Hills. Motion to approve.
Thank you, Farhad. Do we have a second?
Christian Williams from Goodyear. I'll second that.
Thank you. We now have a motion and a second. We'll have those participating in the meeting online now take part in the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. We need to see the faces of everyone to participate in the voice vote. This is to speed up the voting process. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their cameras, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Staff will only call on those virtual participants who did not turn on their camera. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are not on. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor saying aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Members, please leave your cameras on. Steph, can you take a roll call of the members participating virtually who did not turn on their camera?
Victor Cantu,
Aye.
Taylor Reynolds,
Yes.
Chair, the motion passes.
All right, moving on to item number 4 is a presentation of the 2023 U.S. Census Bureau County Population Estimates. Scott Bridwell will present this item. This item is for information and discussion. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Bridwell, and I am a socioeconomic modeling analyst in the socioeconomic modeling group at MAG. And I'm happy to be here today to talk about the Census 2023 county estimates. As probably most of you know, we actually conduct our own estimates in conjunction with the state demographer at the State Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity. And we kind of do these on some different timelines, and we have some different methodologies. And so really what I'm here to do today is to show you what the Census Bureau estimates are and also discuss some of the differences that that we're seeing with the estimates that we produced. And after I do that, then we're going to look at some different sort of related data sets and trends that hopefully give some context to the differences that we're seeing in the different states. So in terms of just more of an organizational perspective, some of the big differences that there are between the Census Bureau estimates and the estimates that we develop with OEO is that we do our estimates a little bit earlier. We do county and place estimates and present them to the committee typically in November. And those typically run through the adoption process and get released in December. And so this would be December of the following fiscal year. The census, they tend to have more of a stacked release schedule. So the national and state estimates typically are released in December of the following December after the fiscal year. The county estimates, which I'm going to go over a little bit more detail, are typically released in March. And then the place estimates, the jurisdictional estimates, are released in May. So we can expect to see some detailed place estimates next month, probably mid-May, which that'll be exciting. We can do some additional comparison at that point as well. In terms of MAG's role and sort of the member agency role in the process, it's obviously also a little bit different. In terms of the Census Bureau, what we're really doing is we're really just collecting data, and we're providing them that data set that they then use to feed into their estimates process. And we typically collect this from our member agencies, which we then provide to the state demographer's office, and then they provide that to the census. And so obviously we have a much more active role in developing our own estimates. So what we do is we do the actual data collection. We develop these for Maricopa County and Pinal County. And typically what happens is the Office of Economic Opportunity develops a method and a result at the county level, and then we actually do the place level allocations. So that's kind of the relationship that we have with them. Now, in terms of the methodology, one of the key differences here is the census is relying on a sort of a two-tier method. There's a method at the county level, then there's another method that's being applied at the place level. At the county level, this is based on a cohort component model. And so what that's doing is it's taking estimates of births and deaths, which are, I guess, not really estimates, they're actually collected from the various health agencies. And then they're estimating migration based on data that's coming from the IRS and also from Medicare enrollment from that as well. So once they have this county level method, they then get that down to the place level using the house unit method, where essentially you're taking house units, multiplying it by occupancy factors, and then taking that and tripling it to whatever your county level total was. At MAG and OEO, we have different accesses to different data sets. So for instance, we don't have access to the detailed IRS migration data that's up to date. That's typically released 2 years after than what the census has provided. And there's been some issues with data availability in the last couple of years. So from 20 to 2022, the method that was used was primarily based on the house unit method. And so this is mostly using sort of census occupancy factors with changes to the housing stock. And then in this year, the state demographer was able to receive good data again for administrative records for driver's licenses and school enrollments. And so that's the method that got applied for this year. Okay, so here's kind of the nitty gritty. Here's a direct comparison. And so what we're seeing here, this is for the state, Phoenix MSA, Maricopa County, and Pinal County. And so what we're seeing here is that the census has lower estimates for this year than the estimates that we were producing. So for County, this is around like 80,000, which is about a negative 1.7% difference. And in contrast, Pinal County, the census is estimating a higher population by about 16,000 more, or a 3.5% difference. Now, in terms of this, is where differences become a little bit bigger. If we look at this in terms of the change, what I'm showing here is a table by county for the fiscal years 21, 22, and 23 that are showing what the census change is versus the MAG OEO change. And so I think the thing that to really look at here that's a little bit different this year is that you'll notice that the census change has really kind of dropped off in 2023, which is something which I think we were expecting somewhat of a decline, but in the change, but maybe nothing this dramatic. It's nearly like half of what the change was in the previous year. And I went back and I looked at old releases of census estimates. And as far as I can tell, this is the lowest change for Maricopa County since like 1976. So it's definitely a little bit different. So this is a big table. I know this is a lot of data to kind of take it, but what I wanted to kind of show here is the various kind of detailed components of change at the county level for both the regions of interest to us, as well as the context within the rest of the state. And tried to highlight some of the key numbers I think that are important here. This is just the census method, not the MAG method. So you can see that Maricopa County this year, as I mentioned before, has a change of about 30,000. Pinal County has a change of about 19,000. And state overall has a change of about 65,000. So of that change, Maricopa County is receiving about 12,000 of that 30,000 in terms of natural change. So this is basically births minus deaths. And the key thing I think to look at, which is a little bit different, is the net migration component here. And so what's interesting about this is that Pinal County actually has higher net migration numbers than Maricopa County does. And the Maricopa County number for domestic migration is now 2,000. And that's a little bit surprising, given especially looking at some of the other counties within the state. They're basically Mojave County, Pima County, Yavapai County, Yuma County all have higher net domestic migration numbers than Maricopa County does. So looking at this in terms of a change over time, this is the migration broken out over basically since the beginning of the estimate series since Census 2020. And so we see in the state, Maricopa County here is in the dark blue, the state is in the orange. They're following a pretty similar trajectory, which makes sense given the size of Maricopa County. But what we see is that the migration was pretty steady from 2021 to 2022 for both the state and Maricopa County. Pinal County in green sees a little bit of a decline from 21 to 22. But then what is really interesting is to look at the 22 to 2023 change, where Maricopa County is going from 48,000 down to 17,000. At the same time, Pinal County is increasing slightly from 15,000 up to 18,000. So this is the total migration component. And so they also then provide the domestic versus the international, which is what I'll run through next real quickly. And so what we can see here is that in terms of domestic migration, Pinal County is again slightly increasing in the green, from 14,000 up to about 17,500. And Maricopa County just takes a huge dive, going from about 32,000 in 2022 to 2023. So a loss of like 30,000 migration. On the foreign migration side or the international migration side, things are much more stable. And this is actually where the bulk of Maricopa County migration is coming from 22 to 23. And then we see a big jump really from 21 to 22, but that's held constant to 22 to 23. So one thing to keep in mind as I've been talking about these differences and is that this is kind of par for the course in a way. There are two different methodologies, two different sets of data inputs that are coming in. And so what these charts are showing are really a comparison between the census estimates from 2010 to 2023 versus the MAG OEO estimates from 2010 to 2023. So the census is in more of the teal color and the MAG OEO is in the purple color. And so what you can see from this really is that for Maricopa County, basically up until the census 2020, that is, the Census Bureau was estimating more population than what MAG OEO was estimating, and they've been estimating less population since the census. The other thing to note that's of interest is that if you look at the slashed red line, that's indicating the census 2020, and there was a little bit more of an adjustment in the census series than there was the MAG OEO series. So the MAG OEO series was a little bit closer in terms of the final census numbers in 2020 than the census was. In Pinal County, there's a little bit of a different mirroring shift happening. In the earlier part of the 2010s, MAG was estimating more population for them versus the census was estimating more in the later part of the decade. And those both had slight adjustments coming down with, again, MAG's adjustment, the OEO adjustment being a little bit lower. And you can see that really Pinal County has really been, the estimates for Pinal County have been much higher since the census than they have for MAG. And the other thing I just kind of wanted to draw off note again to give this context is that if you look at this in terms of the percent differences between the two series, the magnitudes are really nothing that's really out of the ordinary. So if we look back to this time in the last decade in 2013, the percent difference is really a 1.85% difference. So the census had 1.8% higher population than what MAG OEO was estimating, versus now the 2023 estimates that we're looking at, these are lower by about 1.7%. So again, the magnitudes themselves are kind of within the range of what we've seen over the last couple of decades. So what we want to do now is just kind of quickly run through a couple of related data sets to try and give some insights about in terms of why we might be seeing these declines in migration, and also why there are some differences between the two and what we can expect going forward. So what this slide is showing is ARS migration data, and this is net domestic migration for both Maricopa County and for Pinal County. And the exemptions there, this is sort of a correlate in the IRS data for persons. So this is how the sort of a proxy for actual migration. And so what's interesting about this is a key data set that is going into the census methodology to estimate the domestic migration. And unfortunately, they have access to the 22 and 23 data, whereas we don't. So all we can really do is plot up to the data that we have and then, see where kind of those trends are going. So it's interesting. There is, if you look at IRS data, even up into 21, there is almost half of the exemptions for Maricopa County. So there's a negative 43% change. At the same time, what's interesting is that Pinal County is also seeing a little bit of a decline from 20 to 21 as well, with an 11% change downward. I think another interesting point here is that within this data set, you can actually get county to county flows. And so if we look at the flows between Maricopa to Pinal County, So this would be outward flows from Maricopa going to Pinal in green versus flows going from Pinal to Maricopa County. For the most part, since about 2013, there's been kind of a net gain for Pinal County and a net loss for Maricopa County between the two. And so in 2021, in the data that we have so far, this differential is about 8,900. So about 8,900 loss of Maricopa County to Pinal County. In terms of the natural change component of this, and again, looking at the Maricopa County numbers, this really is a big part of the growth in this year's estimates. What we're seeing here are we have births, which are in the teal color, the deaths, which are in the purple color, and then the natural change is just the difference of those, and that's in the orange color. And so there's a couple of things I think that jump out here. For one, births and fertility really are declining over time from 2015. And if we were to plot this going back to 2010 or 2020, that would probably look even a little bit more dramatic. What we're seeing here this year is that there's a little bit of a rebounding in terms of the natural growth, and that's largely due to the decline in deaths in the post-pandemic time. So look with the births being about the 2020 level. The shape of the curves look pretty similar for Pinal County. But we see that there is a much bigger number of, a relative number of deaths are larger here as the natural change is actually going negative for a time. But what's also interesting here, I think, is that the number of births themselves are actually increasing over time, which is reflecting sort of a younger population coming in. If we look at this in terms of K through 12 enrollment, this is something which is a big part of the state demographer's office method for the population 5 to 17. What we're seeing is that there has been a little bit of a decline in Maricopa County. That's again in the dark teal, whereas Pinal County has an increasing enrollment, although the rate of increase is smaller this year than it was in last year. I should say that this data set is a little bit difficult to interpret just because of things like school voucher programs and online enrollment and those kind of things, which could be a little bit of a confounding influence here. Also, obviously, the influence of the pandemic really has a big impact on the enrollment numbers here. Another key factor that we looked at is, this is something that, again, gets used kind of in both methods, is the actual Medicare enrollment. And so what we're seeing is that there are still Medicare enrollments coming in that are increasing, but the rate of the increase is coming down. So really, if you look at the number of the change in Medicare enrollment in 2020 up to 23, it's almost half of what it is for both the state, Maricopa, and Pinal. And so some of the speculation here is that perhaps we've reached sort of peak boomerdom or something where we've hit that point where the maximum number of people that are going to hit 65 have already done so. So we could expect these increases to be coming down a little bit over time. So that's really discussing more of kind of the proxies for trying to capture the overall population. What we're trying to look at here is really more of the housing side. And the housing side has driven a lot of the MAG method over the last couple of years. So I think it's interesting to look at. And so what you have here are for Maricopa and Pinal County for the years 21 to 23, we've computed a ratio. And so this ratio is just basically taking the change in the household population and dividing it by the number of residential completions. And so what you can think about that as is basically for every residential unit that you build, how many new people are you bringing in? And so what's interesting about this is that in Maricopa County, starting in 2021, the census has basically 2 new people coming in for every new housing unit, versus this year, there's less than 1 person coming in for every new housing unit. In the MAG OEO estimates, we are also showing a decline in the number of people that are coming in for a new unit, which again reflects some changes in occupancy, but it's less dramatic than what we see in the census. Now in Pinal County, there's a flipping here. In Pinal County, we're seeing it around 4 people in 2021 coming in per housing unit in the census method, and this is getting up in the more 5 range in 2023. And again, MAG is showing an increase as well, but this increase is not quite as dramatic as what we're seeing in the census. And so some of the questions that we were thinking about internally in our division were, why are some of these relationships happening? Why are we seeing some of these changes in both the MAG method and also in the census method as well? And one of the things I think that's an important trend that's happening really is that, especially in Maricopa County, not so much in Pinal, but is that the nature of the housing stock that's being built is changing. And so what we're seeing is that there's really a much larger amount of multifamily and for rent properties that are being built, especially in the last couple of years. So we're going from 14% in 2005 multifamily up to about 40% in 2023. And the reason why this is important is because multifamily and built to rent properties will tend to have different occupancy characteristics than single family owned properties. So another data set that we have that we then looked into to kind of get a glimpse of some of this is the Real Data Apartments data set. And so that data is for apartment complexes with 50 or more units. And it pretty much is mostly Maricopa County. There's only a couple that we have in Pinal County. So this is just Maricopa County. But what we have from that is we have the total number of units every year, and this is for Q2. And we also then have a vacancy that's provided with that as well. And so what we can see is that there's been a pretty steady increase in building in the number of rental units that are being built. And at that same time, there's also then a pretty steady increase in the number of occupied units, but they haven't quite kept up. They haven't quite absorbed as of yet. And so what that's resulting in is a vacancy rate, which is a little bit higher in 2023 than it was in 20. And so it was going down over the last couple of years, and now it's starting to come back up. So that could be one potential reason why we would expect to see some of those changes in those ratios that I was looking at in the previous slide. So in terms of the sort of the bigger picture, some of the thoughts that we're having about all of this, obviously looking at these trends since Census 2020, the estimates for Maricopa County have been lower than what we've been estimating, while in Pinal County they've been higher. However, those differences are really kind of within the same magnitude that we've experienced in previous decades. We don't feel like it's anything too alarming, although some of the components of change are a little bit interesting and maybe having us take pause to think about why those might be happening. So in terms of those indicators that we're looking in the other data sets, we're seeing that there's some mixed signals, but they're generally suggesting sort of softening of the occupancy rates in Maricopa County and probably a strengthening of the occupancy rates in Pinal County. And I think the one big kind of take-home message here really is that Maricopa County built more units in 2023 than any year since 2007, but we have a lower estimated growth that is lower than any year since like 1976. And so again, some of the reasons that we're kind of speculating about why this might be is that perhaps housing affordability declines are sort of starting to impact the attractiveness for Maricopa County. And that's all I have for today. I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Scott. Do any members have questions or comments? Not hearing any. All right, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. We'll move on to item number 5 on the agenda is a presentation on MAG staff's member agency roadshow meetings. Scott Wilkin will provide an update. This item is for information and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, over the past few months, we've been doing kind of a road show, going out, meeting in person, which is different with our member agencies. We've done 8 meetings so far, and we've got 2 more scheduled next week. Really wanted to thank everybody who has been able to schedule those meetings with us so far. And if you haven't heard from me, or if we haven't gotten those scheduled yet, you will be hearing from me in the near future. I'm about to do another batch really soon. I guess I can turn my camera on. I didn't even realize. There I am. So yeah, we've been doing these member agency tour meetings. We've been talking about some topics like affordable units, asking people, are you able to track affordable housing units? And pretty much nobody does that, at least through the development services program, which is the department we've been meeting with the most. There are some housing departments at the cities that may have a handle on that, but that's not something that planning gets into. We've been talking about how many projects or permits were not approved. That was a big complaint among the home builders the last couple of years, especially at the legislature. And what I suspected and what we're hearing is that almost everything is approved. I think those of you in planning probably know that. We've talked about accessory dwelling units, and I'll get a little bit more into that in the next item. There's a lot of variation around the region is what we're finding, that some places allow them, some places don't allow them, and then the ones that do, there's different differences in there. We've been talking about if anybody has statistics on how long each step in the development process takes. Most don't really actively track that, but there are some places that can get that from permitting software. And I think that's going to be something that you're going to want to get more information on in a little bit. And then when we've been able to meet with economic development, which almost all of our meetings have included somebody from there, we've been talking about labor force data, asking if they have anything that we don't. And we haven't been able to find any magic bullets that provide labor force data that we don't have. Some places use this exact same stuff we do, and some places use our stuff, period. So we've been having some really great conversations. Some of it has veered into showing off our online maps and data tools for those who aren't aware of it. But these have been great so far, and we're going to keep doing them. And like I said, if you haven't heard from me or if we haven't gotten it scheduled, you will be hearing from me very soon. I can take any questions if anybody has any.
Thanks, Scott. Do we have any questions on that update? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 6 is an update on legislation of interest to PopTech members. Scott Wilkin will provide the update. This item is for information and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Every once in a while, if there are some bills of interest to PopTech members, we like to talk about those here at these meetings, and knowing that most of the members of PopTech come from development services or planning. There are a few planning and land use related bills that we want to make sure you're aware of. So House Bill 2297 was signed by the governor. This one requires cities with 100,000 population or more to designate up to 10% of their commercial buildings for adaptive reuse or mixed use without a public hearing. So they still can be required to go through the site plan process and obviously the building code, building permit process, things like that, but they can't be required to go through a PUD or rezoning or anything like that. You can designate areas to exclude from that program as well. And it also allows cities and towns to require up to 10% of the multifamily units to be held for low or moderate income households for a period of 20 years after the remodel is finished. So that is something that has been signed by the governor. So if you weren't aware of that, you're in planning, you're definitely going to want to look into that. You have until January 1st, 2025 to get that implemented. Similar bill, Senate Bill 1506, would require that 75% of commercial land in cities of 150,000 or more allow basically the same thing, not all the same requirements. That one is in such conflict with 2297 that was signed. It doesn't look like this one is going to end up passing. That 2297 was a bipartisan bill that was signed. So keep watch on 1506, but it looks like that one's probably not moving forward any more than it already has. I mentioned accessory dwelling units. There are twin bills, one from each house, House Bill 2720 and Senate Bill 1415 would basically require cities and towns of 75,000 or more to allow accessory dwelling units. That one is still moving through the process. The League of Cities and Towns is actively negotiating for a couple things. One is to include an amendment that would allow cities and towns required to allow accessory dwelling units to prohibit them as use for short-term rental, for Airbnb, VRBO type things. If the thought is if this is really for to increase housing supply and affordable housing, then these accessory dwelling units should not be used for short-term rental. I have not seen that amendment pass yet, but the league is working on that. They're also trying to get an amendment to require kitchenettes so that these can be full homes, places that people can have a full kitchen and not have to rely on the main house. So those two bills have been transmitted to the other house. Both still need a third read, so they're still in the process. The league is still talking to reps and senators to see if they can get their amendments included. So keep an eye on those two. Again, House Bill 2720, Senate Bill 1415 regarding accessory dwelling units. There is another one that you definitely are going to want to know about if you're in planning and development services. Senate Bill 1162 would require cities and towns to create or fill out a housing needs assessment every 5 years. This has a number of different things that are needed to be reported on. I mentioned some of the things we're talking about in our tour, timeframes for approvals, number of number of affordable units, projected number of housing units needed over the next 5 years, it's projected population and projected population and employment, but also, like I said, projected housing need, current and projected housing needs. So some things that are readily available, some things that we can provide to our member agencies, and some things that are going to be a little trickier. I'm not exactly what the best way to get those are. That has been transmitted to the governor as of last Wednesday. I do not know if she's going to sign it. I'm guessing yes, but I haven't heard either way. But she's got some time before that is either signed or vetoed. But keep an eye on 1162, because if that is signed or becomes law without her signature, then that's going to be something that you and Development Services will have to do every 5 years. There's another one that is more for the building community, building official community. House Bill 2584 would restrict cities and towns' abilities to restrict building materials and allow any. My understanding is it would require you to allow any building material to that is allowed in the building codes to be allowed to be used for new construction. I'm not a building guy. I play one when I staff the building codes committee, so I don't know exactly the ramifications of this. This has been sent to the building officials through the building codes committee, and so they're aware of it. There is a ton of opposition to this. Airports and military installations are particularly opposed, and so they are trying to get this killed or vetoed. It has been transmitted to the Senate. It hasn't gone through the committee of the whole yet. It still needs a third read. They're trying to get it amended, which would send it back to the House for another read. But keep an eye on this one, especially if you are in the building code arena. And then the last one I want to mention, you've probably heard about House Bill 2570, which would have basically taken away a lot of the ability to zone residential properties. Design guidelines would have had a minimum lot size of 1,500 square feet. You couldn't require any lots larger than 1,500 square feet. That one was vetoed by the governor a few weeks ago, and I have not heard of any piece of that or all of it coming back as one of the famous zombie bills. So 2570 has been vetoed and will not become law at least this year. I am available for any questions.
Thanks, Scott. Do we have any questions on this item? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 7 is an update on the housing development pipeline analysis. Alex Garza will lead the discussion. This item is for information and discussion. Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, just going to go quickly through sort of what we're seeing in the development pipeline. And just for a refresher of those who don't know, the development pipeline is essentially going to be our way of trying to identify which housing units are going to be built within a reasonably quick amount of time, or which are the developments that we expect to be built soon. These are going to primarily are broken down into 2 categories. They're going to be your platted and approved site plan developments. And then these are going to also include active developments. And what we consider to be active developments are going to be developments which have approved permits, approved residential completions, essentially any developments that we see activity on. And so we're going to take those and plot those into a map, and then we're going to see essentially year over year how many developments are being close to starting completion, to starting construction, and then eventually into completion. And so overall, we see about 287,000 housing units in the development pipeline. And these are, of course, going to include developments that are, very active. You see your Superstition vistas, and you also see some longer term developments which have relatively low building density. And so you have a good variety of stuff in here. And primarily, I think the unit of measure that we find to be important is going to be the active projects, as that we can sort of compare that with the current rate of building that builders right now have, and see sort of long-term how many units we can expect to have if, just for some reason, like construction just stopped today, like how many units would be left. And so this sort of shows us like as to what the cities are doing and how much builders are building. And as of right now, as of the most recent numbers that we have, which is going to be Q4 of last year, we have about 183 housing units in active projects. That includes apartment complexes, duplexes, large residential subdivisions. Everything in between is going to have about 183,000 units. And we will break that down in a little bit into the specific types as well. And so out of those 100, and so that's the total units, is going to be the 183,000. So total, and then we have 106 units that are remain unbuilt. So let's say 100 unit subdivision is there. We'll take the net of that and do that into the unbuilt, sort of taking residential completions to subtract that number from the total. And out of that 287,000, we have about 104,000 units that have yet to start. These are also going to include some longer term projects, some projects that are, maybe newer, that have sort of been sitting on the books more or less for the last, as recent as, last year or, a few years out as well. So breaking that down into specific unit type, we have 181,000 single family units in the pipeline. Approximately of those, 122,000 units are in active projects. We see some large subdivisions that have come online, some large projects that have come online. And so those are reflected in the individual handout that we're going to be giving out, which has each city broken out into all these categories. Out of those 122,000 active projects, we have about 58,000 units that remain unbuilt. And then similarly, we have about another 58,000 in projects that have yet to begin, or are very, being built out very, very slowly. And some of these subdivisions on the farther reaches of the region. Then looking at, since this is sort of the hot topic at the moment, is the multifamily units. We have about 106,000 housing units in the pipeline that are multifamily. As of the end of last year, 60,000 in active projects, 48,000 of those units remain unbuilt. With multifamily units specifically, the residential completions are going to obviously work a little bit differently. But similarly, we see that there is a large stock of multifamily projects that are sort of still cooking. And of those 46,000, or of those 106,000, we have about 46,000 in projects that have yet to begin as well. And then sort of we see year over year, as we're tracking this, we see that the number of units in the pipeline is growing as we, there's obviously some like physical capabilities that the builders have to build, whether that be, capital or labor force restrictions. They can only build so many units per year. And so we're not seeing that number really like shrink, essentially. We have more units in the pipeline every year, as far back as we have been able to track it. But since 2022 until 2023, we see, of course, an increase in those units in the pipeline. But I think one of the biggest changes that we've seen, and sort of going off of what Scott Bridwell's presentation was saying, is we see a higher share of those units, more multifamily units as a percent of the whole in the total pipeline. We have about, and it's about a 6% increase in the share of the total units in the pipelines, from 31% to 37%, of those units being multifamily, and of course the number of single family units are also decreasing in the share of the total. And that's going to be primarily a good chunk of apartment complexes, and included in these multifamily units are also going to be some of those single family complexes, built to rent developments. Seen a good chunk of those increase and being more and more approved and built, as especially since the pandemic, and maybe a little bit before then as well. The units that have also not started and are sort of sitting in that approved with a recorded plat, or something for like a single family or multifamily units that have been approved but have yet to start, are also increasing as well. And the units sort of in the active developments that remain unbuilt sort of stays relatively even. They do increase, of course, as the number of total units in the pipeline increases, but definitely the ratio of that growth from year to year is a lot smaller. And so that's sort of an indicator that, you know, things are being built, and, you know, that stock of developments that are sort of like on the books, as we say, does increase as well. And so that sort of goes off some discussions about, you know, the approval that cities are doing for developments and whatnot. But yes, 23% increase, at least from 2022 to 2023 in the total pipeline. And so I would like to maybe have a discussion sort of about explaining our process and how we do this. So I don't know if I would take questions at this point. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Al. We had if we have a few minutes, if anybody wants to jump in for some of these questions. We're wondering if anybody updates this type of thing, reported internally. If you do, we'd love to see it. We've seen it from a few places, and it's always good to compare. There's always differences in how we classify things, but be interesting that. We've talked about how, you know, data on how long it takes to approve a project. Most people don't, but they could pull it if needed, and you will need it probably. And we also are wondering if you're able to easily tell what the infrastructure status of the projects in the pipeline is. As we look at the map, we can see there's stuff everywhere. Are some things being stalled because the infrastructure just isn't there yet, and it's not necessarily part of the project, it needs to be extended to there, or what? So we're wondering if anybody has, we can take just a few minutes to talk about any of this.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah, Scott, this is Sam with the City of Chandler. We do actually track that internally. We have a current project list, so once the zoning case gets submitted for residential, it goes kind of, you know, through the process. We have 3 categories. We have proposed, approved, and under construction. We're willing to share that information with you. Just let us know what type of time frame you would like it, monthly, quarterly, and we're happy to help out with that.
Great, thank you. We'll talk and let you know.
Yeah, Scott, City Maricopa, Rudy Lopez, same here as well. Like as City of Chandler said, we also keep that monthly data updated. So I'll send you what we have to kind of showcase what we have, but we can let you know when you guys want that as well. So
wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, and like I just want to personally thank the work that the city staff does to keep those viewers and, you know, all those, you know, lists and data sets available. They really do help into keeping this data set current. So, you know, I can imagine the work that takes. So
yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Did we have any other members that wanted to comment?
Yeah, this is Taylor from the city of Scottsdale. And I think perhaps we've sent you our report, Scott, previously, but we do update. I think we do it twice a year now, and we do report it out to city council. We do have like a spreadsheet in the background that I think I could actually log how long it took to, you mean to get through the entitlement process for how long it took to approve?
Definitely the entitlement process, the entire process. I mean, what
I can't recall if we track when it was originally submitted, but that would be easy to go back and collect. I can't recall if our spreadsheet houses that data, but obviously we track when it was approved. And
Yeah.
then we try and track, the year it's built. I'm just curious, is this information, because I was thinking about this in terms of like looking at some of the spreadsheets we have of how many, are still in the pipeline or either active or just sitting out there with entitlements. Were we sharing this with the City of Leagues and League of Cities and Towns or with the state to know, we do have a healthy amount of units coming down the pipeline, and the SB, what was it, 2297 is going to be kind of difficult to implement, at least as we've been talking about it internally. Like the state's trying to step in to tell us how to create more units, but it seems like there's a healthy amount out there. Have we been trying to share this information?
We've shared stuff that we have with the league. We work real closely with them. If you've given it to your intergov and they're working with the league, I know that's very helpful for them. 2297 is going to be, it's going to be strange a little bit, because if you know anything about construction, really, you know how difficult it is to convert most commercial buildings to residential. So even if you designate certain buildings, most of them are going to take a lot more money than I think most builders are going to think it's worth. So I'm not sure what kind of impact that's going to have. I'm really interested to see. But that being said, the legislature recognizes there is something that needs to be done, and they definitely want to do something, and that's
there's just I think with our first blush look at it, there's a lack of detail in there that'll make it hard for us to ensure that we're, I guess, meeting what the statutes would be stating. So like you said, it's going to be weird, or I guess difficult.
Yeah, I agree. It's good luck.
Thank you.
We have any other comments?
One more comment, Rudy, City of Maricopa, and I'm sorry if I may have missed this, but are we also tracking zoning entitlements as well? Just to what's been zoned, knowing that hasn't been platted, but at least it's somewhat spoken for with the yield count of units.
For our pipeline analysis, we don't look at just zoning. We track it. We do use it for other things, but not for the specific analysis.
Yeah. So we actually track the project from as soon as your planning and zoning commission receives it, all the way up until it's finished. So we do have those different statuses in there.
Okay.
Like what Scott said, we don't track it. We don't include it, because it would be an enormous pool of even more stuff.
But I think that's what I think that's what the other gentleman was saying, is that there is, like, City of Maricopa has like 70,000 entitled, like, ready to go zoning lots. They just haven't been pulled for platting purposes yet, but they're entitled. Zoning doesn't go away, it doesn't expire. So it's just another information that we're providing the housing inventory out there. Is just not being executed, obviously.
Yeah, and we all know that there's a number of reasons that could be. It's just we're trying to say if it's platted, it's a lot more likely to get built.
Right.
So that's what our focus for this one is.
Okay.
And I also want to mention, like Alex said, we have a handout we're working on where we'll show each cities and towns pipeline itself. We expect to get that out in the next, probably maybe today, as early as today, but definitely this week you should see that. And if you've got something internal, it may differ from that. And if you want to have a conversation, we can definitely set that up and talk about the differences and where that's coming from, and that might help us refine our work a little bit.
Okay, anything else on this one? Great, thank you for that. Great discussion. Moving on, item number 8 will be postponed to a later meeting, will not be heard today. So we'll go on to item 9. It's an update on the MAG online map viewers. Peter Burnett will provide the update. This item is for information and discussion. Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the PopTech Committee. This is a very brief update on a couple of our MAG viewers that I wanted to make you aware of. First off, our statewide demographic viewer has, we've finally been able to update that to the latest 2022 5-year ACS data. So if you're waiting for that, it's there now. It is updated. If you don't see it, refresh your cache or something like that. You should see it, and it's there and available to you. And as always with our viewers, if you see something that we've missed, please let us know. Or if there's some data there that you are not able to get, let us know, and we'll be able to either, it might be a good thing to add to the viewer, or we can help you with that data as well. The other update I wanted to give was on our statewide employer viewer. We've got a couple changes that are going to happen on there. A little history there. Back in 2017, we started working with our sister COGS and MPOs to build the statewide employer database. It was a great project. We were able to acquire data at a reasonable price to get it statewide, to build the data and work on it. We had great reception and great participation in that viewer at the time. Unfortunately, for various reasons, the data in various parts of the states has become stale and older. And so we've made the decision, because of the age of the data, we've made the decision to pull that data down. Data, anything before 2020 is going to be removed from that viewer. So going forward at this point is no longer going to be a statewide employment viewer. It's going to be an employment viewer for those that are participating. We've reached out to all the COGS and MPOs to ask if they would like to participate, to see if we'll continue to buy data for the entire state, or just those that are participating. We've gotten feedback from a few, but not all of them, which says that, you know, they're not using the data or not wanting to participate to the level that's needed because of staff participation, or excuse me, staff availability on our end. We're not able to create as much of it as we were. So we're putting it on them to create more of it. Of course, we're going to continue to do Maricopa County and Pinal County in our region. That's no question. But as far as areas outside of our region, it would require more participation on their part to build the employer database. So those are some changes you'll see with the employer database. The data, the stale data that I was talking about, should be coming down within the next couple of weeks. And that's my very quick update on the viewers, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Do we have any questions or comments on this item? All right, thank you. Moving on, item number 10, do we have any requests by a committee member for an item on a future agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to adjournment. The next meeting of the MAG PopTech is scheduled for Tuesday, May 28th, 2024 at 10 a.m. With no further business, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, Scott, could I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, okay. Hey, Taylor, can I give you a call when I get back upstairs and like?
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
That works.
Thanks.
Bye.